Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome if you're the first-time listener. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses the things schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I'm AJ, your host, and across from me is Jason. Jason, how you doing?
Doing great, AJ. Thanks for having me.
Are you getting ready for the weekend?
Sure am. It's 4th of July weekend coming up, so I'm looking forward to some outdoor grilling.
Yeah, some of you may be thinking, well, didn't you say something about 4th of July a couple episodes ago? So we typically record things in multiples, so that way we can have a cache to just kind of throw out there and get out there, especially if we are busy with teaching and stuff, because our normal job is at the school. So we want to be able to have that consistency, to be able to have these shows be able to be public to everyone at the right time. So we try to get, ahead of ourselves. And so that's why you're here on the same date. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the 4th of July. Are you going to see the fireworks?
Absolutely. That's the biggest part for me. Even if I don't have a good view wherever I am, I still, watch it on the TV, what's going on at the National Mall type thing. That's a big part of 4th for me.
Oh, yeah, man. Grilling out and everything. Most of my things, it doesn't matter what it's dealing with, but if it involves eating, I'm all for it. So
you and I are in the same boat there.
Yeah, but I look a lot different. I clearly have shown that I have eaten. If you go to our website, you'll know what I'm talking about. And yes, I have a trainer, but don't, gauge his ability based on mine. I'm more lazy. But last episode, we talked about choosing a mentor, and it was a really, really good episode. Hopefully you have listened to it. If you haven't, take a step back and listen to it after this one. This one, we're going to be talking about a life plan. We're actually starting a new series. We're starting the college strategy series. So this deals with just specific strategies. And if you've heard the episode before or the podcast before, you know that I'm big into strategy. And so this one is dealing with a life plan, how to create a life plan, the importance of having a life plan, and so on. And I have a feeling that you, the listener, and me are going to learn a lot this one, because I think I'm going to be sitting on the outside a little of this one as I've gone through the show doc. But I'm excited.
I'm excited about it too. But before we do, remind everybody, reschool'd.com. That's reschool with a D, not an ED. Check us out, see our episodes, our series in development, social media handles. We are Reschool'd Pod on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Also on your favorite podcast apps, Spotify, Google, Apple, all the big ones. Follow us, get notifications for when we have new episodes and things like that if you're inclined to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And shoot us a question, shoot us future topics for, shows, and always shoot us your success stories. We'd love to hear them. And also, I'm not going to be too forthright with it, but we may have some, new news coming up here in the near future. We may be coming to another social media platform soon. We may be hitting the tubes, but right. We'll be bringing that news a little bit later.
Big aspirations.
Yes, absolutely. But again, just another way that hopefully we can help you. So let's get to our quick question of the day. And our quick question is probably the most direct quick question we've had geared towards the main topic, because the main topic is dealing with life plans. So today's quick question is, Jason, do you have a life plan?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. That was it. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I have always had a life plan. I've used it regularly. I still have one, and it's still an integral part of my life, and it has been absolutely instrumental to me throughout. I first got one during college, and I've only used it more and added to it and things like that since. How about you? Have you got one?
I do not. I don't have a life plan. I do have a financial plan. So it's very similar, I would assume, is what you're talking about, but mine is more from the budget side of it. So what I hope to be, or where I hope to be, and how do I get there from the financial sense, again, accounting. So that's kind of my background. But the life plan aspect of it, I was very leery about the financial plan side of it before I got into it. So naturally I was had those same, concerns about life plan as well. So hopefully maybe you'll be able to talk me up into creating one, because I do think there's value to it. It's just, to me, how much value. So, let's get into it. Let's just dive right into it, because this will allow us to, save time. Cause I know this is something that's really, you're very passionate about. and I want to
Yeah.
be able to give us time. It may run a little bit over, but that's okay. Let's first start, define life plan. So what does it mean when you say life plan?
So the way I teach it, and I've taught this for quite a while now, it was something I learned early on. The explanation and definitions I got early on weren't quite like I'm telling now. But when I define a life plan, I look at it as one, just a map that is not a straight line drawn anywhere. It is just an overall picture that says this is, or things that I could or desire currently out of life. It begins on one side with where you are, and then on the other side, it's all the places you could be. So just like a map, it's a huge picture. And like most maps, there are a lot of ways to get from one point to another. And so to use it in that way is, it may be a misnomer to call it a plan, because the plan somehow tends to develop along and along as you make your way in whatever directions. And I use the word directions plural because I'm not focusing on a single direction here. I'm focusing on just generally where your life takes you and how that moves you forward in that big world that you've identified that might be what you want out of life.
So I'm going to probably interject probably a little bit more in this episode than in past, because I feel like I may be siding with some of the listeners on this one, in that I may be more ignorant about a life plan than I want to accept because I don't have one. So what you're telling me is it's not a direction, it's directions.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. It
so
is.
That's a big thing for me, because I always assumed that it was just, okay, this is the way I had it in my head was, this is where I'm at and this is where I want to be. And that's A to B destination. And so clearly I have started off on the wrong foot.
Well, life is chaos, right? And
Amen.
life has innumerable options for directions you can take. So if you look at it from the map point of view and say, look, here's a big picture of what I want my world to include. What are some ways that I can meander and weave in any given direction? And it helps you recenter always, right? To say, all right, this is where I am, but there's still directions I want to go. I hesitate to say there's a forward and a backwards, right? I mean, we write from left to right in the Western world, right? But so, there's usually the starting point, and then there's everything else around it. So how you draw out a life plan doesn't necessarily have to be like that. It just simply needs to be inclusive of things that you want in your world, and it will allow you to, as things change, you can mold or redevelop always, I will say. You can redevelop that map to include what you want in your world, and you can use it as a guidepost in a way to help you find your way. It's not something you have to follow step by step, but once again, there are steps in there and things that can tie together, and that's actually the most beneficial part about the map. I have this process that I use for developing it, and probably the best illustration of that is when I tell about how I used it over the years. And so that's my process. That's why I believe it's so important.
So for someone like me, who, one, doesn't have one, and two, is maybe apprehensive about creating one, I'm going to give you my reason. Probably my biggest reason for apprehension as to have one. And I want to see if you can give me reasons why my assumptions or my thoughts are potentially flawed. My biggest thing is, if I have a life plan, which again, my first assumption was already wrong, that it was A to B. It's not necessarily A to B, but it's A to the whole rest of the alphabet. I'm afraid that I'm confined to that, and which confinement sometimes leads to stress. And I'm a type of person that I just live life as it comes to me, because I feel like it de-stresses me to a point where I'm not trying to live up to something. And again, I keep using the word try because it doesn't always happen that way. But if I don't have that end point, it allows me to still roam and be a little bit free and have those failures and not worry about not meeting that standard that I've set up for myself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And let me reiterate that this is not something that should add stress to your life. Stress is, a response to things that are pulling on you, right? It should have actually an effect of reducing anxiety, which is the somewhat stress or worry that you feel about things that you often can't control. You may be able to control them to a certain extent, but things that you can or can't control that have not happened yet. It's a feeling of worry about things that could happen. And that's usually by virtue of not having control. And so people start to feel lost. And in my mind, the life plan is that. So, and that's why I think very importantly, when you get in school is when you should start developing it, and why it's so important outside of school and post school, just for the reason that K through 12, right? You probably were with your parent or caretaker. You had structure. You knew what you had to do every day. You knew the courses you had to take. You knew what your life looked like. Some changes came about when you graduated high school or are going to graduate high school. Now you're going to go to college, but that's a choice right now. But it still provides structure. It still provides, this is the next step. These are the classes you have to take. Maybe not the schedule that you're going to have or what classes you absolutely have to take all the way through, but here's a lot of the common classes. Here's what that looks like. But after that, all of that disappears. That structure that you've had all your life starts to dissipate. People begin to wonder. People begin to feel lost in a way. Having some ability to conceptualize what you want out of life, having some ability to visualize that, and then having some way to say, look, this is where I am. This is where I wouldn't mind being. And there's no one way to get there. There's no one single direction. And one thing might be so unrelated to the next that you can't even see how they're on the same map. But they are. Everything in your life is on the same map. And you will be incredibly surprised as you start to make your way through life, how some of the next steps that you take, how the things that are there in front of you can work together towards different goals. And that's why my personal story, I use it all the time because it's a perfect illustration of how that's true. And so with that being said, the aspect of incorporating things, making you not feel lost, making you feel like the hurdle isn't too big, where do I go next? It always gives you something that you can selectively or elect to do that will take you forward in life and give you meaning. And when I say meaning, will give you a sense of, look, I am moving towards things that are long-term or short-term, but are in the future ambitions. These are aspirations. These are things that I want out of life, not just career-wise, out of life in general. So that's how I use the plan. That's why I believe it's useful, even to someone like yourself who's been hesitant to, even develop part of one. Of a financial plan is part of a.
Sure.
And I want to ask you about that later on. But for someone who's hesitant to put things to paper because you think it might add stress or something like that, I'm here to dissuade you of that. I'm here to tell you that it will actually reduce in the long term. Maybe not necessarily stress, but worry in the form of anxiety.
Yeah, and I will say, clearly I haven't learned from my first mistakes. It took me a while to get the financial plan because I had the same apprehensions. My wife pushed me when we first got married. We need to do a budget. We need to do a budget. And I thought, especially kind of as we got about middle ways, we've been married for 12 years now. So about middle ways, 6-7 years, she really started pushing me on that because we had that feeling of living paycheck to paycheck. Actually, we used to say we were living paycheck to the week before paycheck because it just didn't make it that long. And I thought, no, I don't want to do that. And she finally asked me why. And obviously, naturally, I was like, I don't know. I just don't want to do it. But the more and more I thought about it, I actually formulated an answer. And when I formulated that answer, it shocked me. Like it was just one of those things that I was being real honest with myself. And I wanted to make sure that I was very articulate and it wasn't just some made up answer just to pacify. I really I wanted to know for myself why. And so my answer to the question is because I know what we would have to do in order to save money. I know the things that I would have to give up in order to save money. And we had created a standard for ourselves and a life for ourselves that I enjoyed, and I wasn't ready to give that up. I knew what was going to have to happen. And so that's why I kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it until we finally did it. And when we finally did it, my biggest hurdle was the fact that I thought it was going to be restrictive. I thought it was going to be more stressful because I had to live by it. I had to do this. And what I found from the financial side of it was exactly what you're saying. It was not stressful. It was actually freeing of stress. It wasn't restrictive. It is only restrictive because to the point that you make it. You make it as restrictive as you want because you're the one creating the budget. You're the one that says what goes where. If you want to spend more on this, you can. It's not restricting you. You have the complete ability to do whatever you want. It's just putting it to paper and being able to see it. So right off the bat, I'm seeing a lot of similarities with the financial side and the life side that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Extremely similar. And they're going to serve the same purposes for you. That fear of loss, that fear of not meeting some expectation, that shouldn't be there. Your life is your life. It can be as broad or as narrow as you want it. It's what you want.
Yeah.
You just need that guidance. You just need that ability to visualize what it would take to have the things you want out of life in whatever shape or form, whatever that may be.
Well, and I'll come back to the next piece because I want to get on to the next one because again, I am the ignorant one of the two of us when it comes to the life plan, and I don't have one, and I see the value. Now, by the way, we're talking about this, and it's funny that this is one of the episodes, and Jason's very big on it. I don't have one for my personal life, but we have started, after talking to Jason about this kind of stuff, we've started a life plan for this podcast. And even in that, I'm seeing value to it. So this is not one of those things where, do as I say, not as I do. We're actually doing this, and I'm actually going to be starting to do this with my personal life plan. I'm going to work with my wife, and we're going to do it from a family setting. So again, I just wanted to put that out there that we're just not telling you to do this kind of stuff. We're living this. Jason has been living this, and I am working to live this. So Jason, to help all of the listeners and myself out there, do you have a strategy or strategies for coming up with a life plan?
Well, just so happens I do.
No kidding.
Yeah. Well, I've been teaching this for a pretty good while now, and I've found an approach that I think resonates with my students, and it's not exactly what I did early on, but it's what I've evolved to do. I highly encourage people not to just focus on career, focus on your holistic life. So take a big sheet of paper, a really big sheet of paper. You can take a poster board if you want to, right? It really doesn't matter.
I feel like I'm going back to like ninth grade.
Yeah. I mean, just have that blank canvas and say, look, here is where I am. Here's me in the middle. And when I say here's where I am, just put yourself and then say, what are the areas of life that I care about? Is it finances? So some people are motivated by finances for different reasons, right? And you're going to need to explore that. Is it a way of keeping score? Is it security? Is it possession? Is it a feeling of accomplishment for yourself? What is it, right? Career-wise, what is it, the things that you think you might want? Is it notoriety? Is it respect? Is it a creative output or a sense of accomplishment with something hands-on or done?
Mine is doing as little as possible and getting paid as much as possible.
Well, that, and there's a reason behind that, right?
Sweet. I'm not flawed.
Is the reason to maximize the other aspects of your life?
Yes,
right?
It is exactly what it is.
Right? So you've identified that. You say, one, you see a necessity there, but you want that level of, you want that, right? You want financial success, but you want to maximize time. Those go hand in hand, right? I mean, there's always a trade-off between the two, or usually is. So you care about some other things in life. So there are the social aspects of life, obviously how you relate to others. That can be, significant others. It can be your children.
I was
it
about
can
to say
be
mine's
just
family.
right? Yeah. So how you relate to those. And then there's other corners of your life as to yourself, diversion, right? Things that you want in that regard that you feel like, okay, this is what matters to me in terms of if nobody ever else sees me, do I care that I feel like I'm in physically good condition? Do I care that I feel like I look good because I'm wearing nice clothes, or it makes me feel good about myself for that reason? Do I want to feel like I'm accomplished in a sport, that I have this level of skill in this because it gives me some level of personal satisfaction? So there's others, there's yourself. And then, like I say, I do like to focus then again on things that you want to achieve career wise, right? Financial wise, as separate categories there. Because as you can see, they interrelate, but for different reasons. So I have to focus on that. And there's only one thing in life you will do more than work, and that's even for people who don't work that much. There's only one single activity you will do more than work, and that's sleep, right? So work is going to be a big part of it. And if it's the financial reward from it, if it's the fulfillment, if it's the title, if it's how others perceive you, these things are going to interrelate. But I would create these quadrants, right, on different, and I shouldn't use quadrant, that means four. Create these things around the outside. You can even do it as a circle and say, these are things that I care about, and then start to fill in inside. You gave me an example of you want to do as little as possible for as much money as possible, right? But you do have to have some idea. How much money do I want? And what does that mean career-wise that I'd have to do to get it? Because it is very rare that you're not, there isn't going to be some correlation
Of course, yeah.
between the two, right? There aren't going to be changes in things you'd have to do to get it, everything from education to credentials to networking to that type of thing, right? So you start to work your way inward professionally, right? There are lots of options. Do you want to have a title? Do you want to own your business? Do you want to have a creative output? Do you want to have a finished product, something that will resonate? Do you want to have recognition from others? Or do you want to have recognition from a specific group? Is there some level of personal fulfillment you need? Is there a way you keep score? And work your way out and start saying, like, look, I do want to have my own business. I do want to have this. I do want to have this. Personal side. What do you want? I mean, I give you examples like, do you want to travel? Do you want to meet certain types of people? Do you want to see things? Do you want to experience things? Do you want to possess things, right? Do you want to control things? All of that, all of these are different things. And so what do you want to do? Your interaction with others. How do you want people to see you, right? How do people actually see you? What are some connections between what you achieve financially, what you do career-wise, what you do that might affect somebody's perception as to who you are and whether you're an interesting person? Those things start to relate to each other. And you'll put down some specific goals. So right now you've put yourself in the middle. And from the middle, you'll start to put out where you are and things you've done. You've gotten a high school education, or you've learned how to play an instrument, or you've learned how, and you'll start to put these things about yourself from the center, moving out. And then you start to understand long-term, the bigger picture, things you want about yourself. Now there are things that are going to fit in there as well. Are you going to go to college? Are you going to get a certain type of job? Are you going to get a certain type of experience? Are you going to do certain things? Are you going to meet certain people? And I'm not saying the names of people, certain types of people, certain types of experience, and start putting these things around. So the circle starts to fill itself in with things that you want in this big map about life. You can look at it as like a globe and you're putting in the countries, right? All of this outside are things that will ultimately fulfill your world, will fulfill your life. And these things that you make your way out to will interconnect. It doesn't seem like at first that somehow doing this one thing, right, will connect to others. But it does, particularly when you get close to yourself in the center and you start talking about the specific things you want to do. They will start to interconnect, and you will start to achieve more things or move further towards the things you desire out of life by doing one thing will move you in a direction towards all of the things you want. And you never thought that could happen before. But if you can't look at it all together, it's difficult to envision how one step can move you forward in a way that you never imagined in so many areas of life that you care about. And like I say, in just a minute, if we've got time, if you think we have time, I'll give you my own story, right, and how
Sure.
that interrelated. And it's just an example of how that works, how those things in your life start to interrelate and move you outward towards overall who you want to be in life. And those things will change, obviously. The things you can do, the things that present themselves, the ideas that you have will change as you accomplish things. They just get consumed in the middle, right? That's you now. Those are things you've already done. So that gets shrunken down to who you are in the middle, and new things start to fill in the circle. And sometimes even the circle itself, those things that you want out of life get bigger.
That's awesome that you're bringing this kind of stuff up. And there's actually something you said, and I'll talk about it later when if we have time to talk about the financial side of it, because I think it's the key to it all. But before we get to that, I want to go kind of on the negative side now. And let's just assume that there's people out there that have had or have done life plans, but didn't stick with them. What do you think there are any common reasons why people don't stick with their life plans?
I do.
'Cause I have my own opinion on that one.
I think it's related 100% to direction. People get lost. There are too many options, and you end up choosing none. There are too many next steps, and you end up choosing none.
This is a nightmare for somebody with ADD, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but the way people with ADD get control over things generally is to make their world smaller, to focus on things, right? To sometimes
Lists are a beautiful thing.
Right, checklist. Even the medications that facilitate it really just help make your world smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Concentrate on things better. Okay, I don't take that medication myself, but I know a lot of people who do. And that's the way they've always described it, right? It just allows you to concentrate. It makes your world smaller. So
It
in a
allows me to
way,
focus. I take it. It allows me to focus.
so how in the world do you then, if all of these things are options for life, or if you have all of these ambitions, or you just have thoughts about what life could be, but you have no direction about what that means, just to think about that, to get that outside circle of that plan going, and then starting to fill it in towards the middle and saying, look, these are all great big, what do they call them, hairy, ambitious plans or whatever, but it starts to draw down towards much smaller things that get towards the middle, right? People who don't have those immediate next steps to take, the ones that are difficult and the ones that aren't, start to lose their path. And all of a sudden, we have a finite number of days on this earth. All of us do, right? And so how you use them, opportunities do at some point start to shut themselves down. You don't have that option for a path anymore. There aren't enough days left, right? That type of thing. So by and large, always giving yourself that structure, but in a way that you choose your own path, right? Because I'm not a high structure need person. I like making my own path. Okay. I don't need somebody else to tell me. Other people want somebody to tell them. And in that case, the plan works just as well. You have to, once again, start making out something, and you have to tell yourself to do it, right? Me, I always used it as a checkpoint. And when I say I used it, I mean, I used it every day. It was something in my life I looked at almost every day.
Yeah, you said something that you had on the back of the background of your computer, right?
Yeah. I mean, early on, before I had computers, I'm 40 years old. Early on, all right, in college and stuff, I got computer midway through. As funny as that sounds, but I drew my life plan on the outside of all of my notebooks. I had it as my screensaver. I still, to this day, have a document always on, and I have 4 computers, I believe. I have a document that I share in Dropbox, right? That's right there on the top. That's favorited. That I constantly look at it, and I constantly make changes or additions to it because I continually understand more about myself. I'm not going to lie to you. My life plan started out very linear, and I've already accomplished almost everything on it, almost twice over. And it's because of the direction it gives you, right? And because of that, it just grows bigger. It's never something that's finite, right? The plan always just continues on.
Yeah, my reason was, and it actually leads into the next question we're going to have, but my reason, at least from my perspective, my experience of a reason why I think I would not stick to it is, I've done this work. I put all this stuff into the sheet of paper on the direction I would like my life to be, or it would be going, and something changes. I put all this stuff down and this is where I want to be. And all of a sudden something happens and it is not in my life plan. And so I would look at my life plan and go, well, what's the purpose of this if this variable in life comes up and I can't change it? There's nothing I can do about it, but it changes my entire life plan. For an example, and this is not my example, but a lot of people have this situation where they have an unplanned child. And they go through the birth, and now they have the responsibility of this second human that they have to raise, and that throws a huge monkey wrench into everything that you just put on that poster board. So my question to you would be, what happens when those things that you put on that poster board don't go as planned?
So used correctly, it will not change everything on that poster board. It'll just make the circle outside bigger. It'll be another direction. And many of the things you've already done in life will, again, lead you down a path that incorporates this new portion that's so important. So the biggest thing about the life plan is to get it from being linear and to say that every next step you take, how do I make certain that that helps me in all directions? And that will never go away. Saving $1 today, even if the purpose of that dollar is different, will still help you in any number of paths. How you allocate that dollar can change, and how you allocate the amount of time, resources you invest in any aspect of your life can and will always change. There's no question. We know life changes so much. This is not a static, non-changing document, right? So with that being said, having these things that you do always matter. That is the core aspect in giving you some direction that the next step, there's always a next step. People say that, men particularly, when they hit roughly my age or a little bit older, they go through midlife crises. And why? And usually it's because early on they had all these plans and thoughts of what they'd be. And even if they didn't have specific plans, they had these thoughts of what life would be and where they'd be. And then they get there and they're not. They're not where they thought they would be in so many realms, socially, professionally, financially, right? And it leads them to rebel against it. And they do crazy things like buy a Corvette, grow a ponytail, and,
I wish I could just grow hair.
yeah. So they, they kind of implode their life for a while, and then they come out of it. And why do they come out of it? And most psychologists will tell you that there's a reckoning. They come to the understanding that, well, everything's okay. Anything I wanted or had why did I even want that? They recalibrate what they wanted out of life, because you always do. That changes. And then you can now focus more at that point in time. You can focus more on the things that you do have and that do matter to you, the things you have accomplished, the things that are real. And generally, there's a greater level of contentment by focusing there, not on what can be, but focusing on what is. The life plan kind of helps you do that from day one. It points out all these things and how big the world is or how small the world is, whatever you want in your world. But you've always got that next step to take, not the feeling of anxiety that I got to do this, but you always know what you can do. You're never without purpose. You always know that, well, I can do this, and it's always moving me towards this direction. And it leads to a general sense of contentment in where you are and where, if you do this, where you could be. If you make it there, wonderful. But there is no ever making it there. There is no end goal. It's just a general focus and direction, because there are no end goals in life, right? I mean, everything. You reach something, there's always something else, right?
Yep.
And we too often confuse contentment with happiness and things like that. And that's for a whole nother episode,
Sure.
right? But having that sense of direction, having that sense that the next step will contribute and that it will bring some level of contentment, not just frustration that I haven't taken 2 steps, right? Because every step, if you do it right, you'll be able to decide those steps in a way that just help in all areas of your life.
Yeah. And, we're getting to the end of this podcast, but it's starting to let me, it leads me to believe that I think there's going to be a follow-up to this topic, because I still think there's more to talk about. And I still think there's more that we can do and say to help the listeners as they go through their life plan and creating their life plan. Hopefully they are creating their life plan. And also, I've talked about this before, the financial side of it, that's more my area. And with students coming out of college with student loan debt and all this stuff, it's vital to have a financial plan. And I'm now learning more and more that it's vital to have a life plan just for the betterment of your life too. I will end it on this though. And one of the things that you said that resonated with me from the financial plan side of it, the budgeting side of it, as much as it does for the life plan side of it, is the reason. Having a reason is the key to getting to that point. So for me, with our financial plan, my family is debt-free. We have no debt other than our house. We had lots of debt prior to us going through this financial plan, but we thought, okay, we're going to get out of debt. That's our goal from our financial side was we're going to get out of debt. And we had a reason why to do that. We wanted to get out of debt because we wanted to go do more things as a family and not be confined to saying, well, we can't do it this time because we don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that reason allowed us to make the sacrifices that we needed to in order to become debt free. It allowed us to keep the motivation and keep it going to the point where we paid off all of our debt in 13 months. And the last payment of our debt, we had a business loan and some other loans that ended up being somewhere around close to, I think it was about $35,000 to $40,000. We paid it off in 13 months. And to tell you in my eyes how God works, our 13th month of us paying that last debt payment off was March of 2020. For those who don't know what happened in March of 2020, depending on when you're listening to this, that is the beginning of the pandemic, the quarantine, COVID-19. People started losing their jobs. People started not knowing where their next, the money for the next food was going to come from. And instead of us having to work and worry about how are we going to pay off our debts and how are we going to sustain, we just become debt free. And man, you talk about stress just lifting off of our chest and things becoming so much more open. And it allowed us to take this bad time that we've been in, again, the pandemic, and have fun with our family in this time. We turned our focus away from the bad and put it into the family. And it was a great situation.
So 13 was not an unlucky number for you.
Not even a little bit. I mean, it was unlucky in the sense of what we're going through. And we didn't know that we were going to go through that at the time that we started this, but it just so happened to work out that way. And like I said, I can't be more appreciative that we were able to do that. And, I give that to my wife. She was the one that pushed me towards that when I needed to be pushed, and she was there. So.
Well, you've inspired then something. We definitely need to make certain sooner rather than later we're incorporating that financial planning topic into our episodes, because I know it's in our plans, but right, we
need to get it quicker than I think is planned for. So
yeah. So.
Well, that is an awesome show. I know I've learned a lot. I hope the listeners have learned a lot. On our next episode, we're going to be talking about something that I think all of us need. It also comes from the life plan. It comes from the financial plan. It comes from academics. We're going to be talking about motivation. We're going to be talking about how to maintain that motivation, where to get that motivation. And we're going to talk, maybe you just need some motivation. So we're going to try to help motivate you, in those areas of your life. So that'll be on the next episode. Jason, before we leave, you got anything to say?
Just once again, we're always here for you. So get those questions into us, share your experiences with us, successes, we'll celebrate them with you, right? So, but get that information to us. Your interests are our topics and we want to talk about them.
Awesome. Well, y'all have a good one and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.